So Sneferu's son, Khufu, is the famous one whose name people will recognise, Khufu, Khufu. He builds the Great Pyramid at Giza. So he is by no means the most innovative, but he builds sort of the biggest one.
And most optimistic about his own life.
Yes, exactly. He survives long enough to see it completed. The other thing to say about these pyramids is they would have been painted,
yes.
I think, white.
Yes, yeah.
Except for, what's his face? Who was it that had the nice, pretty pink granite ones? Anyway, except for him, he's doing wild, crazy things, but the standard, I think, is to paint them white. And then on the top, they have the reason when you look at the pyramids at the moment, if you look closely, right at the top, you don't see the actual point because they're sort of missing the actual sort of final kind of triangular point at the top is not there because they are actually separate structures that are made out of metal so that they shine. Rather, they're coated, or I should say they're finished with metal. Not only would you have this incredible white thing gleaming in the sunshine, you would have
a beacon at the top
right at the top. Incredible. Imagine that catching the midday sun.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. What the effect that must have had. So anyway, those are all missing now, but they do have in various museums, they do have just the kind of sort of pointy bits at the top. I don't believe that's the official name of them, but the pointy bits do exist in some. Yeah, they do exist in some museums, and you can see them, and they have beautiful engravings with hieroglyphs, and no doubt kind of sort of spelling, a bit like sort of Victorian monuments in London. If you crane your neck high enough, you'll see the name of Victoria or Albert or whichever monarch is being celebrated. A bit like that you'd have had right at the top. Not that anyone would have seen it, but it's there. You have these beautiful inscriptions.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they wouldn't exactly call them egalitarians, the ancient Egyptians, but they do respect. And also the civil service too. In the early days, all the jobs are given to the family of the pharaoh. It's a kind of nepotism structure. But they realise when they start to build these extraordinary pyramids, actually, this is going to require more than a sort of lazy son of a pharaoh is going to be asked. You
need some real people to come to the work.
Yeah, exactly. So meritocracy really takes off at the same time as the pyramids, as does the sort of bureaucracy and the kind of taxation system. It all takes off at the same time. It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Because it's all connected to this extraordinary economy that kind of grows up around. You had entire cities. I mean, it's a bit like Clapham Junction. Behind Clapham Junction, where I used to live for a bit, there is this Victorian sort of estate, which was built for the railway workers. So it's kind of that times 100 for the builders of the pyramids. They had their own city that was built for them. So Giza has its own whole thriving own economy. It's a town in and of itself. There's what's called the Pool of Giza, because to transport these stones, the one transport that the Egyptians knew and understood and mastered was boats. So they built canals to take. Of course, the Nile is sort of incredible resource in this regard. You can take things up and down grain. It's amazing for transporting things up and down. But obviously, beyond that, you need canals to get things from the Nile over to close as they are to the Nile. The Giza pyramids, they built canals to get right up to them. So you had the Pool of Giza, which is the sort of harbour where they would drop these things off. And there's a guy called Merer, I think he's called MERER, and he leaves a diary. It's sort of dry reading, but it does give you a sense of what the life of a kind of administrator on a construction site for a pyramid was like. And basically it's like day 23 picked up some stones at such and such and took them to such and such. Day 24 picked up some more stones, took them to and it kind of goes on like that. Yeah, basically, and it basically charts his journey back and forth to Giza from the stone quarries where they were being picked up. So not the juiciest memoir of all times, but very useful in terms of mapping out how it all kind of fit together.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Great Pyramid of Giza, the big one, is significant in that it is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. All the others have either disappeared or were never there to begin with. Actually, here's a good question for you. Of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, which one do you think is most likely to have never existed at all?
To have never existed?
Yeah, have a think. There's one that's basically mythical that people now think never existed at all. It was a figment of the imagination.
I would have probably gone with, is it like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, or is it?
Indeed it is.
Yeah,
I got that at a pub quiz.
Yeah, it sounds like a pub quiz question, to be fair.
Yeah, so they think that the Hanging Gardens never actually existed.
Yeah. Well, I suppose
which would be a shame, because they would have been an incredible, had they existed, or maybe they did. It was an incredible feat of
engineering,
sort of irrigation,
growing
growing plants in the way that they were able to. Anyway, that's besides the point. But it is the only surviving ancient wonder of the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, because I suppose to that point, like, there is like at least some supporting evidence of the majority of the other ancient wonders of the world. Like, obviously, the Colossus of Rhodes isn't there anymore, but there's documented evidence that it was there at some stage in history.
Yeah. In being vulnerable for a minute, when I was going to Rhodes with Becca a couple of years ago, I was a bit thick and I said, "Oh, we should go and see the Colossus at Rhodes." And she said, "No, you're numpty. It's not there anymore."
Yeah, you're a few
And I was
thousand
like,
years too
I was
late.
like,
I think.
Oh man, yeah, I didn't see that. It didn't pop up on my BBC News app.
You only just missed it.
I know, damn. If I'd just been a bit sooner. But I did manage to go to Notre Dame about 2 weeks before it burned down, so that was quite good. Not good that it burned down, I should say.
They've restored it now, haven't they, though?
Yeah, they have. No, they have, of course. Very French. There was a builder with a cigarette. Being a bit careless.
And also, I heard as well, interestingly, they actually used one of the Assassin's Creed games to help with the modelling of it because they'd done a full in-depth 3D scan of the whole cathedral for the game. So it was actually like it was actually like quite a good source of knowledge for them to rebuild.
Oh, that's cool.
Which was,
I suppose so, because then you get that beautiful digital map of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's really cool. Good. Well, anyway, I'd remembered who it was that had the pretty pink one, and it was Khufu's grandson, Menkaure. So his son, Khafre, we think possibly in deference to his father, he builds his slightly smaller. Right. It's about 3 meters shorter or something. It's like so he was obviously thinking, I mean, there's two possibilities. Either the builders couldn't be asked with the kind of megalomania of the pharaohs, and somebody said to him, "Look, Khufu's is as big as you can go. You can't go any bigger. It's not going to work," hoping that would put him off. Either that was the case, or if you're thinking sort of cynically, it may be just political move. He didn't want to be seen right after his father's death to be already planning to outdo him. That might have been a bit tasteless. Yeah. So whether it comes from sort of genuine deference or whether he was just thinking in sort of smart political terms, he built his slightly smaller. But as I said before, he's sneaky and he picks a slightly higher bit of limestone ground on which to build. And so they kind of look the same. Or even from some angles, Khafre's actually looks taller than Khufu's because... So he's sort of having his cake and eating it slightly. He gets
the best of both.
He's being sneaky. Yeah, he's getting the best of both worlds. He's both being respectful to his father and pipping him to the post slightly as well, sneakily. Anyway, so that's Khafre. But what Khafre is famous for is the face of the Great Sphinx. We think that it was Khafre that built the Great Sphinx. So his son, Khufu's grandson, is Menkaure, as I said before, the smallest. He's the one with the oracle who tells him, "You're going to have a short life. Don't be starting anything big. You may not be able to finish it." So he very sensibly says, "Fair enough." I mean, it's huge, but it's teeny in comparison to the other two. They don't go down in size kind of proportionally. It's a massive drop. Anyway, sensible chap decides he's going to listen to the oracle.
Be modest.
Yeah, and I think in fact he does die young, and he's rewarded by the fact that he's actually managed to finish his pyramid before he does.
Yeah.
So that's basically the kind of high point of the Old Kingdom. And that takes us basically to 2500 BC. There's so much going on here. Just to recap, within the Old Kingdom, so dynasties 3 and 4 run from around about 2700 to around about 2500 BC. So it's about 200 years.
Yeah.
And that is the pinnacle of the pyramid building thing. And I think it's also to do with the changing theology, mythology. They had, as I hinted at earlier, there is this move by Akhenaten later on to go to one god, the sun god, Ra or Aten. Aten being the disk itself of the sun, whereas Ra is the sun god himself. But anyway, Userkaf, Userkaf, he shifts the focus from all these various gods, Osiris, Horus, Isis, all those characters. He shifts the focus to primarily being the sun god Ra. And again, let me see if I can find this word. There it is, henotheism. So I was making things up earlier, but the word is actually henotheism, Henotheism, worshipping one god whilst acknowledging others. So this is the move that they're now making. And in response to this, there are temples built to the sun god Ra.
Yeah.
Also, it should be said the priesthood are becoming massively powerful. It's a bit like the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
The priesthood are landowners. They are, in many cases, they're sort of deified themselves. So the shift goes away from pyramids as the great religious structure in the sense of the tomb towards temples. Again, falling away from the pyramid as the kind of pinnacle of civilization. Anyway, so there's various characters after that, which I won't delay us with because they aren't important. But the very last pharaoh who engenders the fall of the Old Kingdom is a guy called Pepi II, P-E-P-I. And he is important because he's the longest reigning monarch, really, ever. I mean, if we believe
the records that they give.
What was said about him. But basically, he is made pharaoh at the age of 6 and he lives to be 100.
Wow.
So he has a reign of 94 years, if we are to believe what's come down to us. Some people think that there's a mistake in the figures and they actually meant 64 rather than 94. That somewhere along the line there's a kind of translation error. But nevertheless, it doesn't really affect the point, which is that he's very, very old by the end of his life. So there is a thing called the Heb-sed, which is basically a kind of jubilee celebration of when a pharaoh, a bit like we have sort of silver and gold and platinum and all the rest of it for our monarchs. The ancient Egyptians have 30 years as the kind of unit. After 30 years, there's a big celebration. But there's a kind of dark twist to this, which is in earlier times, before, in the sort of pre-dynastic times, it was supposed, and there's not really strong evidence for this, so people debate whether it really was the case or not, but at that point, at 30 years, because the health of the king is directly attached to the health of the kingdom and the ability of the Nile to flood as it does, they kill the king after 30 years as a way of kind of saying, right, okay, we're not going to let you get old, because if you get old and frail, then the state will become old and frail and all the rest of it, and the Nile will dry up and all this awful stuff will happen. So basically, when he's at his prime, he is killed. Now, there's debates as to whether there's a sort of symbolic death here or whether a literal death. But anyway, by the time of the Old Kingdom, it's purely a symbolic ritual. So he goes through this thing where he's seen to die and be reborn. And the way that they do this is they actually put on like a kind of Olympics. It's sort of weird. To test his fitness, because obviously they're obsessed with his health.
Yeah.
To test his fitness, they make him basically run between various points. He has to do sort of track and field.
It's the ancient beam test.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, I think there are 2 points between which he has to run back and forth. So literally, in that sense, it is like a beat test. But anyways, 30 years is the point at which you have this first jubilee. But then every 3 years after that, you have another one. So paranoid are they about this that they're not going to let another 30 years go by before they test his fitness. Every 3 years he has to prove himself. So you ended up with this completely absurd... But they didn't really have a mechanism, because they weren't killing the kings anymore. They didn't really have a mechanism for deposing a king who was seen to actually be getting old and frail. So you had this kind of bizarre thing whereby Pepi, as he's getting older and more frail, they sort of put more and more makeup on him, and they give him kind of guards to sort of carry him, and he still completes this funny ritual, this running back and forth. But by the end of it, he's basically being carried.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously getting older and older. And funnily enough, right at the end of his reign, the Nile does actually begin to dry up and there is a famine. So it kind of confirms their worst fears that by letting this happen, by letting there be an ancient monarch, that the health of the kingdom is destroyed. But the reason it's come about is simply because he's living so long, both his sons and his grandsons die before he does.
Which is, yeah, crazy.
Because this is obviously a time, pre-modern medicine. I think the lifespan is sort of 50s.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have outliers, but there's definitely like more things that can kill you along the way.
Yeah, exactly. So they have this strange situation where there's no heir. So there's a sort of succession crisis, and various kind of cousins sort of come out of the woodwork, and they all fight each other, and it descends into kind of internecine warfare. And there is this real dark nadir for the Egyptian people, because not only are they suffering from this famine, but they now have warring factions, warlords basically, fighting it out. So this is the kind of sad end to the Old Kingdom. Of course, it regenerates again and things go back to how they were, but that's another chapter for another day.
But it's also
the Old Kingdom itself comes to a sort of fiery death in this combined famine and war-torn landscape.
Yeah, I mean, also it's incredible that we've covered all of that and we're not even halfway through. There's still so many more eras to get through, still a lot more events to happen. But it's interesting that obviously we associate the ancient Egyptians with the pyramids so heavily in popular culture, It's quite interesting to know that actually that period of time only lasted for about 200, 300 years. And after that, they were kind of largely done with building pyramids. They were just like, yeah, it's kind of, we don't need to do that anymore. We've got better things to do with our
Yeah.
time than build pyramids. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, you've got to give it to them. They perfected it, and they thought, well, move on, use our energy on something else.
just thought we quit while we're ahead.
Been there, done that. Got the
Don't need
t-shirt.
to, yeah,
Got the
don't need
papyrus.
to- yeah,
Been there, done that. Got the
yeah.
got the bandages.
Got the bandages to prove it exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, we're gonna obviously next time we're gonna cover a bit more of kind of like the middle sections of ancient Egypt and cover more of their kind of rise to prominence. But yeah, I think we've.
I think it's worth. Yeah, no, I think we have, but I'll just do a quick kind of addendum to that while we're on the Old Kingdom because it's a good time to do it.
For sure.
The Old Kingdom is traditionally seen as a kind of insular period where they're focusing internally on development, on the pyramids, all the rest of it. But contrary to popular belief, there was actually an enormous amount of trade being done already with lands further afield. So we mentioned the Levant, they were doing trade. So obviously famously Lebanon, on the flag, they have their beautiful cedar tree. And indeed, at this time, from that region, they were trading grain for cedar wood because obviously they were seafaring, a river-faring really, people, the Egyptians. But the one thing they are cursed with is kind of naff wood. They have the trees that they have don't grow tall enough to get the nice, long, continuous pieces of wood that you need for ships. So they basically have what they call Byblos ships, because Byblos is the town that they're trading in the Levant. So the ships that they build from this beautiful cedar wood, they call Byblos after this famous trade route that has been established. So that's one thing they're doing. To the south of them is the kingdom of Nubia, sort of modern day Sudan. The trade was done over land to Nubia with caravans and as well as Nile expeditions as well, using the river. But they would get luxury items from Nubia, so gold and ivory were hugely popular. Gold for the sarcophagi that they're making, obviously inlaid with beautiful gold, used for jewellery, all the rest of it, along with ivory. And then they're also getting things like ebony, incense, panther skins, and even live animals like baboons are imported for royal entertainment. And then lastly, the land of Punt, I guess you would say, or Punt, P-U-N-T, which is basically modern day Somalia, Eritrea. So they're using the Red Sea to get there, and they are famous for their frankincense and myrrh. So I wonder if when the kings go to the crib of the baby Jesus, whether the frankincense and the myrrh that they get is from Punt. I don't know. It's worth saying they're also getting electrum, a compound of silver and gold.
Okay, right.
I think is electrum. And they're also getting obsidian as well, beautiful black obsidian. So incredible things they're getting from Punt. And then we mentioned in Nubia, they're also getting granite. So the lovely pink granite that Menkaure puts on his little pyramid may come from Nubia. And lastly, let's go back to Byblos. They're also getting oil and silver from there as well. So although they are in a
Very
kind of insular period, they are nevertheless exploring the highways of trade.
Which, well, as we'll cover in the next couple of episodes, that obviously expands to a larger degree.
Yeah. Oh, and lastly, the last one I missed off is the Sinai Peninsula. So that there were heavily guarded mining expeditions, which would have been made up, again, as we said before, the slaves are sent to the mines, so enslaved peoples are sent to the Sinai to extract turquoise and copper, which, again, beautiful for jewellery, making tools and all sorts. A last fact, during the reign of Snefru, remember him, the trial and error guy, there's a piece called the Palermo Stone, which is a famous royal chronicle, records that 40 ships in a single year laden with cedar wood arrived on the shores of Egypt. So that's pretty impressive. 40 ships of beautiful cedar wood for shipmaking.
Yeah.
Not bad for 2600 BC.
Yeah, not bad at all. Considering
not bad at all.
We were probably rolling around in the mud at that point.
We were absolutely
slinging dirt at each
and having a good time. Having a good time doing it.
Fantastic time doing it, but yeah, completely blissfully unaware of what was going on.
Completely. No, we were. We were sort of making stone circles to worship the sun and all sorts.
Yeah. They say they were happy doing it.
Absolutely.
Nice.
I'd say the closest, just thinking of Stonehenge there, one last thing to say would be going right back to the beginning of all of this, there's a thing called Nabta Playa, which is the first recorded. It's a stone, again, it's a stone circle. Like Stonehenge, some people think it was a way of kind of recording the time of day with the way that the sun passes through and all this kind of stuff. Nabta Playa is the first kind of sun calendar that the Egyptians have, and it goes right back to sort of 5000 BC. And they do that precisely because of, as I had said right at the beginning, because of this squeezing of the inhabitable areas as the desert encroaches, as the climate changes. They start to panic and go, well, hang on a minute, we need to know when the Nile's going to flood and yada yada. They build this pretty sort of primitive stone circle which is their earliest way of telling the kind of seasons from the way that the sun falls. So early kind of forays into astrology by the Egyptians.
Very cool.
But anyway, we've circled back, we've come full circle.
Yep, absolutely.
What a nice place to end.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed this episode, and as much as we have. We're also going to be, like I say, covering different topics around ancient Egypt, the different kind of stages of the civilization, and excited to get stuck into the next bit next time.
Middle Kingdom, here we come.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.